Howdy, folks. This is just a reminder that if you like this content, you can help me out by liking, commenting, and especially by subscribing. And be sure to hit the bell notification so you always get notified whenever I have a new video. Hope you enjoy this. Flo M says, "Hey Jimmy, do blessings work if you're watching live TV when it happens? If so, does that extend to something like confessions over the phone?" Okay. When it comes to blessings, yes, it is understood that, like, if you're watching the Pope and he's doing a blessing, that is meant to include the people who are watching via television or hearing the blessing on radio as well. Does that extend to something like confessions over the phone? Well, confessions over the phone are not provided for in the current law. And there's a good reason for that. The NSA and China and whoever else has tapped our phone lines is going to know all about your confessions. It would have even been worse back in the day when we had party lines, when anyone could pick up the phone and listen to everyone in the town talking on the phone. So we're not meant to have confessions over the phone. There is a question about if we did, would they be valid? And there are different opinions on that. Some people think you need to be physically present in order for the sacrament to be performed. But I'm not sure about that, because there are two sacraments that, for most sacraments, that's totally right. You need physical presence for the sacrament to be performed, because the sacrament depends on something physical happening, like water flowing on the skin in baptism, or a hand being laid on with anointing of the sick, which also involves oil, even though the oil is actually not essential. The Eucharist. If you receive communion, that's something you're doing something with your body. So they require bodily presence. But there are two sacraments that don't depend on doing something with your body in the presence of another person. And those two are matrimony and confession. Both of these depend on an exchange of information. You don't have to touch anybody in either sacrament. No special substance like water or oil has to touch you. All you have to do is communicate the information. And in the case of matrimony, our law allows for that information to be communicated at a distance through what are known as proxy marriages. So a proxy marriage is a thing, they used to be much more common than they are now. But back in the day, people would want to get married, but they couldn't be together for one reason or another. They couldn't physically get together. A classic example is a soldier gets, drafted and deployed to war before he can marry his sweetheart. And he really wants to be married to his sweetheart, even in case he dies. He wants to be married to her, and she wants to be married to him, even if he's going to die. And we hope nobody's going to die, but they really want to be married together, but they can't because he's deployed. He can't physically be present. So what do? You appoint a proxy. And so the groom appoints a proxy to attend the wedding ceremony, and the proxy acts on behalf of the groom. And so he will, instead of the groom personally saying, "I do consent to be married to you," the proxy indicates, okay, the guy I'm representing, he consents to be married to you. And so the proxy carries the matrimonial consent. And you can have proxies on both ends. So as long as the marriage is otherwise properly witnessed and all that stuff, which is actually not essential to the marriage, because they used to have unwitnessed marriages that were totally valid. This is an added requirement the law has provided. But if you can get married by proxy, and you can exchange the needed information between the parties, that yes, Party A consents to be married to Party B consents to be married to Party A. Well, then why can't you do the same thing with confession? Why can't you have Party A, the penitent, can give the information of the confession to someone else who can serve as a proxy? In fact, this happens. because you have situations where the penitent does not speak the same language as the confessor. And so we use a proxy, also known in this context as a translator. And so what happens is, let's say you have someone who is deaf and mute. They don't speak English. They speak, let's say, American Sign Language. So they go into confession. They're fortunate enough to have a translator. They actually don't have to have one, but they're fortunate to have one. And so they go into the confessional with their translator who speaks ASL and English. And the penitent gives the information, signs the information. This is what I did, and this is what I'm sorry for. And then the translator takes that information and translates it into English so the priest can understand it. And then the priest gives the absolution. We've effectively introduced a proxy here. Okay, so if we can introduce a proxy and you can have marriage at a distance, why can't you have confession at a distance? It's got a proxy too. Why can't you just do it over the phone? Well, if you read some older theology manuals, like Moral and Pastoral Theology by Henry Davis, who was a Jesuit back in the 1930s, he said you could. He said you could do confession over the phone. Now, that got set aside, and in the days of party lines, I'm glad it did. But in principle, I don't see any reason why Davis would be wrong about this. So I would suspect that if you did do confession over the phone, it would be valid. Because it's another information-based sacrament. You exchange information. The penitent says what he did and what he's sorry for. The absolution, which is also information, is conveyed back, and the sacrament is done. So I think that it would be valid in principle, but I think there are very serious reasons not to do it, connected with privacy and so forth. Now, to step out a little further into the speculative realm, let's suppose we're in an emergency situation. And this actually kind of came up in COVID when they were doing the ridiculous lockdowns and prohibiting people from having contact with each other in a lot of places. People raised the question, can I go to confession over the phone? Well, some people were actually did go to confession over the phone, but they didn't take the opportunity to address the issue of, is this actually going to be valid or not? So you're kind of stepping out there a little bit. But I can imagine other situations. Now, I'm not a priest, but if I were, and if I woke up in the middle of the night and someone calls me and says, I'm having a heart attack, I've already called the ambulance, but I don't know if they're going to get here before I die. I'm so sorry for my sins. Can I be absolved? I would say yes. This is an emergency situation. I would absolve the person, at least conditionally, because if they're in if they're in danger of dying, then you do whatever you can to help them to get right with God, even if it breaks the norms. And so at least conditionally, I would absolve them. And so that would be my advice to any priests who ever encounter such situations. And before we go, just one more reminder that if you like what you've watched, you can help me out by liking, commenting, and especially by subscribing. I'm trying to grow my channel, and I'd really appreciate your help. Thank you, and God bless you.